people, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive drone and missile strike that took place during the previous night, but this time the Russians were attacking the southwestern part of Ukraine, mainly the Odessa region. The sources are saying that several Iskander strikes were recorded during the night. Later we got report that first the Russians destroyed IRST air defense system in the vicinity of the city by the name of Odessa. On the evening of August 19 at about 10 p.m. of the local time, units of the armored force of the Russian Federation carry out a high-precision strike with ballistic missiles weapons on the air defense facility of the armored force of Ukraine located on the territory of the hydroport in Odessa. So as soon as the Russians destroyed this air defense system, they managed to clear the path, to clear the way for drones to attack deep inside of the Odessa region. And later we got another report that the Russians destroyed a very important facility, oil facility in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Ismail. So this attack carried out right after the Russians destroyed Ukraine air defense system. During the night we were receiving a lot of videos of how Ukrainians were trying to probably secure the situation, to handle with the situation with fire that covered this oil facility. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians destroyed not just this Triton oil depot, the Russians damaged a tanker that was moving in the direction of the, the southern part of the Odessa region. So as you can see, the Russians and the Ukrainians, despite talks, despite attempts from the United States of America to settle the conflict, continue attacks. And the most important, it seems that the Russians and the Ukrainians continue, energy of war when they try to destroy energy facilities, fuel facilities of each other. So now the ball is on the side of Ukraine. Most likely they will attack the energy facilities of the Russian Federation in coming days. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. As we discussed in the previous videos, most likely the Russians are planning to attack the Zaporozhye direction not from the south and the northern direction, but now it has become clear that the Russians are going to move in the direction of the Odessa region from the east. And during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. Pro-Ukrainian resources from Deep State reported that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the area of the settlement by the name of Olgovskaya. I would like to tell you and point to attention that the Russians show pretty good dynamic in this area. Let's compare the maps between the dates. So as you can see, yesterday we colored this territory in Russian favor, also based on pro-Ukrainian resources, which means that the Russians are moving and moving and moving. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 18th of August of 2025, and this is approximately the date when the Russians launched their offensive. During the first day of attack, the Russians took under control true lines, fields and fortifications. Then the Russians managed to answer the village of Olgovska itself. Currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlements if Ukrainians lose control over the territory, and if the Russians are able to take under complete control everything along this red line. This is gonna mean one thing, that the Russians will move further in the western direction with the purpose to attack two villages, Okhotnichne and Poltavka. So the Russians continue their Zaporozhye offensive operation, and we see that the Russians are getting closer and closer to the settlements of Gulyaye Pole and Pokrovskaya. Very important settlements on further way of the armored force of the Russian Federation in the direction of the river of Dnipro itself. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk and about the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Currently there are very heavy clashes for the southwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation, and according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours and during the previous night, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions a bit. They restore control over completely over the central part of the city, and currently the clashes are taking place for the settlements of Troyandna, Leontovichi and Zverova. The Russians are regrouping, and as for now the Russians are falling back, at least according to pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers. As for pro-Russian resources, nothing of this was reported or confirmed by any pro-Russian resource. At the same time, according to the same sources, the Russians continue their offensive operation along the railways. After the fall of the village of Novoukrainka, the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Chinishina, the settlement that's located along the railways on the away from the city of Shevchenko in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk itself. The primary target of the armed force of the Russian Federation is the settlement of Novopoltavka, and according to geolocations we got, the Russians continue bombing and attacking the city with the purpose to prepare the village before the beginning of a major assault operation. So the clashes in the south and the southwestern part of the city of Pokrovsk continues, the Russians advancing, the Ukrainians are counterattacking. Now let's talk about the southeastern direction, where we can see very heavy clashes between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Let's start with the southeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. According to different sources, the armed force of the Russian Federation managed to answer the facilities that's located in the northeastern part. This information was provided by neutral mappers. At the same time, the armed force of Ukraine managed to counterattack Russian positions along the railways between the settlement of Rodinska and Dorozhny. Several positions were restored by the Ukrainians, and we see that Ukrainians are preparing themselves before the beginning of another major counter-offensive operation with the purpose to restore control over the villages of Sukhetska, a village of Zatyshek, and of course over the mine by the name of Krasnolimanska and over the mine by the name of Rodinska. So this territory is a vital question for the armed forces of Ukraine. If Ukrainians are able to restore control over this territory, then most likely they will be able to win some time before another, let's say, wave or another push from the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The Russians understand this as well, so that is why they're trying to improve their positions, and the only way to improve their positions is to secure the northern and the northeastern parts of the settlement of Rodinska. Today we got reports that the Russians continue offensive and that the Russians managed to improve their positions along the perimeter of the city of Rodinska itself. So there are very heavy clashes, but we see that Ukrainians lost their momentum. I would like to remind you that during the several days ago, the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation and they managed to improve their position significantly during the first days of attacks. But now we see that the Russians managed to stabilize the situation, to slow the Ukrainians down, and now we see that the Russians are getting back the initiatives in their hands. As for the northern direction, there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Kucherov Yar. The Ukrainians are counterattacking the village from the northern direction, trying to restore control over the territory. The Russians are trying to improve their positions by improving their flanks to the east and, of course, in the western direction. Today we got report that additional 3 lines were taken by the Russians. As for the Shakhovo pocket, there are also very heavy clashes, but we see that the Russians are tightening the news around Ukrainian positions. During the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian resources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions once again, that the armed forces of the Russian Federation continue pressure in the area of the southern part of the settlement of Vladimirovka, and today several pro-Russian reliable resources reported that Ukrainians are at risk to be caught in cauldron, or at least they are at risk to be cut by the Russians into several groups that will be destroyed one by one in coming days by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So we are entering the decisive part of the battle for the Shakhovo pocket. If Ukrainians lose this pocket and if the Russians are able to take this pocket under complete control, at the end this will lead to complete collapse of the entire defense of the Donbass, because the Russians from this moment will have very powerful, very big footholds below them, and they will be able to use the situation to move further and to advance further in any direction, in the direction of the city of Pokrovsk, in the direction of the Kramatorsk-Slaviansk, or in the direction of the Kharkiv region from the south. Now let's move further. Now let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Kostiantynivka, because probably the most important updates are coming exactly from this area. During the previous 12 hours, several pro-Russian resources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions significantly in the southeastern part of the city of Kostiantynivka. So let's take a look at how the map was been adjusting during the previous days. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 18th of August of 2025, and this is exactly the moment when first reliable resources reported that the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to answer the southeastern part of the city of Kostiantynivka. By the end of the 19th of August of 2025, we made first adjustments in Russian favor. The Russians secured the southeastern part, and the Russians managed to improve their positions to the west of the Seversky Donetsk Donbass Canal. By the morning of the 20th of August of 2025, we got report that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, as you can see, in the southeastern part of the city of Kostiantynivka. Furthermore, we received geolocations that confirm that the Russians managed to take in pincers the settlement of Alexandra Shultina. This is the video I'm talking about. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian positions and Russian forces in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Alexandra Shultina. We have no doubts that Ukrainians are about to fall back from this territory under the pressure of the armed force of the Russian Federation. And another important detail that I would like to point to attention, that at the same time where the Russian offensive operation in the direction of Alexandra Shultina and in the direction of the city of Kostiantynivka, the Russians began their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Stepanovka, which is located to the southwest of the city of Kostiantynivka. So as of now, the Russians are trying to take under complete control everything along this red line, but now we can see the whole picture and the whole plan of the armed force of the Russian Federation regarding the battle of the city of Kostiantynivka. Now we see that Ukrainian contingent that is currently located on the territory of this pocket between settlements of Kliban-Byk, Ivanopoly, Plishivka are at a very high risk of being encircled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation in coming days, not even weeks, not obviously hours, but in coming days. It seems that Ukrainians can start retreat from this area in coming hours, or probably this is very interesting because, once again, the situation around the city of Kostiantynivka happened right after the Ukrainians redeployed a significant number of their units in the area of Russia, the Russian breakthrough to the northeast of the city of Pokrovsk in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. So that was very interesting Russian maneuver. The Russians forced to think Ukrainians that the offensive operation in the direction of Dobropolye is the major and primary task of the armed force of the Russian Federation. But as soon as the Ukrainians redeployed their units in the area of Russian breakthrough, the Russians began offensive operation in the direction of Kostiantynivka. And now the Ukrainians have nothing to do with this. They can't redeploy these units back because, first of all, they are involved in combat, they are exhausted, and if they redeploy them back, the Russians will get another momentum and they will continue offensive operation, and this can lead to complete collapse. Now the Ukrainians need to start thinking what to do with the city of Kostiantynivka, where to get reserves and reinforcement. And probably the Ukrainians try to bring additional forces in the area of Kostiantynivka with the purpose to stabilize the situation, but the Russians managed to discover several temporary deployment points of freshly arrived units, and during the previous night and during the previous day, the Russians attacked these temporary deployment points with Iskander missiles. The Ukrainians suffered huge losses. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Liman-Sivers direction. Very interesting details and updates are coming from this area. Pro-Ukrainian mappers reported that during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to secure the central part, the most powerful and well-fortified area of the Serebryanka forest. So this territory was completely taken by the Russians, according to pro-Ukraine resources. It seems that the battle for the Serebryanka forest is coming to the logical end. The Ukrainians are about to fall back from this territory completely, and this collapse can lead also to complete collapse of defense of the city of Siversk and Liman. Furthermore, when talking about the city of Liman, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the settlement of Zarechne. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians sent a tank to counterattack Russian positions that were taken in the southern part of the village, and how Ukrainians were attacking Russian positions within a short distance. Don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to force the Russians to fall back. Obviously, this attack was very powerful, but at the end, Ukrainian tank retreated from this position without taking this territory under control. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map and we have colored the southern part of the settlement of Zarechne under complete Ukraine control, the Russian control, sorry. So now we see that by the beginning of the 20th of August of 2025, the Russians have established control for more than 20% of the village of Zarechne, and the Russians continue advancing an assault operation. It seems that the Battle of Liman is going to obviously take place during the 2025, maybe during the winter or late autumn military campaign. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation about the city of Kupyansk. Very interesting video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources during the previous 12 hours. This is the video that I would like to talk with you and discuss in details. In this video we can see just, let's say, Ukrainian tank. in the central part of the city of Kupyansk, and how Ukrainian tank within a short distance attack a standalone building, this one. Not later, but with this video, the author of this video published some comments to this video, and he stated that the Russians tried to hide in this building. There were 3, 4, 5 soldiers, probably of another sabotage and reconnaissance group, that managed to infiltrate so deep inside of the territory of Kupyansk. The Ukrainians managed to discover Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group. First, the Ukrainians suggested the Russians to surrender. The Russians refused to surrender, and then Ukrainian tank attacked the building. So this episode took place exactly in this area, exactly in this point, and now, of course, this video probably raised a lot of questions. First of all, what is the current status of the, let's say, eastern bank of the eastern part of the city of Kupyansk? Is this just the only episode, or right now the entire eastern part of the city of Kupyansk is just a big gray zone? Do we need to color the territory between the central part of Kupyansk and the territory under complete Russian control, or we don't need? So lots of questions, and most of the mappers are asking themselves what's to do with this video and what exactly is happening in the city of Kupyansk right now. One thing I can tell you for sure, that the situation for the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the city of Kupyansk is probably the worst since the beginning of 2022. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.